Good morning. I love that song. It's one of my all-time favorite songs. Thank you, Aaron, because it says a lot. You know, there are people who are complaining about Santa being black. There are people who have made noise because some people see God like they look. But the truth is, that is God. Every one of us is God. So however we show up, it's the God in us that is showing up. No matter what you look like, how short you are, how tall you are, what color your hair is, your eyes, your skin color, we are looking into the souls and spirits of God when we look into each other's eyes. So we need to get over the fact that God appears differently. Because in the eyes of children, just like that song says, some children see him like they are. We need to be like those children and see God as we are. We are God incarnate. The Spirit of God is alive in each of us. But that's not what I want to talk about today. It's Christmas Day. And for Christmas, for some people, it's a difficult time, and maybe some of you. I know I have a couple of friends here who've lost children during the Christmas holiday, or this is the first Christmas that they've spent without their children. And I had that experience on December 1st, 1974. We had planned a big Christmas, and we had this big wheel underneath the stairwell. Because every time my son heard the clickety-click, clickety-click, clickety-click going down the sidewalk of this little boy's big wheel from next door, he would run to the door. And so we thought we'd get him a big wheel. And Phil had planned to put these little blocks because he was a little short, so he was going to put blocks there so his feet could reach the pedals. And we argued over whether to wrap the big wheel. Because where I come from, the toys were always under the tree, right? Santa would bring them from the pack just like they were. Where Phil came from, Santa wrapped the toys and put them under the tree. And a big wheel, you know, that's a pretty big box. A lot of wrapping paper. So we argued back and forth. We hadn't agreed, and the big wheel sat and waited for Santa. Well, December 1st, Toomey drowned in the bathtub. And Christmas was never the same again. We gave the big wheel to a neighbor, and I never saw Christmas like I did as a child. And then on Christmas Eve, 1976, the day before Christmas Eve, 1976, we came home. We just had PJ. He was 11 months old. He's the father of the twins and Alexander. And Tammy was 7. And my father begged us to come for Christmas. He didn't want to fly in an airplane, and he wanted us home for Christmas. And so the night before Christmas Eve, I was 25 years old, and he said, I want you to sit on my lap, and I want to tell you something. You're special and you're going places, and I wish I could live to see it. But if I don't live to see it, remember one thing, you're nobody if you're not trying to help somebody. And then he said, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can tell some traveler that he's going wrong, then my living will not be in vain. Little did I know that that testimony was a eulogy. The next day was Christmas Eve. We were all looking forward to the big Christmas. I was home. My family, my son, who was 11 months old, my daughter was 7, Phil, and my father was stabbed that day 27 times. And I felt that I had been told something that was more precious than any Christmas gift. I had been given a direction for the rest of my life to help somebody. That's why I'm here. That's why I chose the ministry as a second career. Because I have been charged with the responsibility to help somebody. And so have you. Now, my father, who served in World War II, drove ammunition trucks in pitch black darkness behind enemy lines in France. Only went to 5th grade. He was a Louisiana farm boy, but very smart. He never knew that my name, Sandra, comes from the Greek name Alexander, which means helper of mankind. So I knew what my charge was. That very day, those words, when we were at the hospital, resonated in my mind, what he had just told me the night before. That's what the Christmas story is all about. It would be years before I'd stumble upon a scripture that marked the beginning of my journey in ministry. It's from the book of Joel, the 2nd chapter, and the 25th verse. I will restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten. So those of you who are going through a difficult time right now, coming to grips with Christmas, whatever it is, know that the God in all of us will restore those years that you feel the locusts have eaten. That's the meaning of Christmas. Duke and I and David Adams and Nian were going to talk today about the meaning of Christmas. Nian's on her way home to California to visit family for Christmas. And I want you to hold David Adams in thought and prayer as he recovers from a difficult health challenge. And he's doing well, but I want us to keep that affirmation. Well, you know, when I get into my lessons, I always like to start with something funny. So I kind of got you off on a sad note. I want to back up a little bit. And this is a happy occasion. Oh, thank you, Steve.
Now I understand.
Now, okay. Thank you. This is a happy occasion. Now, there was a guy from up north, probably Boston, where my son-in-law is from. You know those people, Yankees. He was driving through Georgia, where my son and his family live, and it was December. And he sees this nativity scene outside this church, and he takes a second look, and he goes, really? And among the shepherds were 3 firefighters dressed in their yellow jackets, their yellow garb, and with firemen's helmets on. And he pulled over, and he stared at it for a while, and he decided there was a business across the street. So he went across the street to ask, what is the meaning of this nativity scene? And so the woman at the counter says, I can't believe you don't know that. Why? He said, why the 3 firemen? That doesn't make sense to me. She says, oh, it's simple. You know, it's simple. And she gave him a pitying look, and she says, you know, you Yankees are all alike. Don't you ever read the Bible? And she reaches from under the counter, she hands him a book, and she says, you need to read this, because it says right here in this book, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they came from afar. Now, if Kathy Sweeney is back there, she speaks that language. She's from Tennessee, so she knows about coming from afar. So I always affirm, I don't usually say this out loud, but a couple of weeks ago, a congregant who has been here for years used to hear me say this and remembered it. Before I would start speaking, I say, Lord, fill my mouth with worthwhile stuff and nudge me when I've said enough. Now, if you see me lunge forward, you know that's a kick from God saying, okay, Sandra, it's time to shut up. How many of you have ever heard of Lev Nikolaevich Tolstoy? You've probably heard the last name. Leo is his first name, but that we call him. Born in 1928, and he died in 1828, and he died in 1910. He was a Russian writer, a novelist, a social activist, and you may remember he wrote such great novels as War and Peace and Anna Karenina, which has been made into a movie. Leo Tolstoy inspired Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela, as Leo Tolstoy was a believer in the power of non-resistance. He did not believe in violence. He did not believe in war, though he saw many of them. Tolstoy said, everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing themselves. The Christmas story is about changing from the inside out. And when we do, we change the world. In Psalm 30:15, I say this to my friends who are here who are celebrating the first Christmas without some of their loved ones. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy, which is the theme of the last Advent Sunday, joy comes in the morning. So the meaning of Christmas is the meaning that's given to that. What does that mean? I'm going through a downtime in my life. How can I enjoy Christmas? Well, Tolstoy told a story about that called The Christmas Story. And it is such a powerful story. It goes back to what I experienced, what many of you have experienced or will experience, the true meaning of Christmas. Christmas brought me painful memories, but it also changed my life. Once I realized what it's all about. You know, we go out shopping, we try to buy the next best thing. We want people to be happy with the gift we bought, how much we paid, what it looks like. But it's a deeper level of giving that Christmas calls to us. 21 years ago, I sat over there in the soprano section on Christmas Eve and sang my heart out with tears rolling down my cheeks as the lights from the candles burned and the beautiful sanctuary, as it was last night, shone. Because 2 little girls entered this world who weren't expected for another month. 21 years ago was another way for me to be restored to those years. The greatest Christmas gift I have ever had in my life when Alondra and Alexis entered this world. You see, we have to open our eyes and look for the gift in every experience. And every day is Christmas when you do that. Jesus said it. He said, I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And we do that by living each day as it comes, whatever comes, the ups and the downs. Because the truth is, God will restore to you the years the locusts have eaten. I'm a living witness. So I want to share this story with you. It's a story of hope. It's a story of peace. It's a story of faith. It's a story of love that Leo Tolstoy told. Christmas Day. Once upon a time, many years ago, there was a shoemaker by the name of Nicholas. He had a tiny shop on a narrow little street in a small town of Nestor. He lived alone. He had lost his wife many years before, and then, a short time after, lost his only child, his son. Because of these circumstances, Nicholas was very lonely and depressed. He kept the shades on his shop pulled down because he didn't want to see the world going by. And I remember that. I remember not wanting to see people happy. It reminded me how sad I was. But this story takes us to another level of that. His small room was in the back of the store, and he had papered the windows so that no light could enter. Have you ever been there? There were even times when he became angry with God for taking from him the 2 people he loved the most. Christmas time was especially difficult for Nicholas. And on this Christmas Eve day, he was feeling such great despair that he only wished his life could come to an end. He closed his shop early that day and went to the temple and told his holy man that his life was filled with such misery that all he wanted was the God to take his life from him. The holy man told Nicholas that ending your life was not the answer to the relief you seek, but rather, he said, the answer lies in God. When you give yourself to God, the holy man said, then you will find reason to live. Did you get that? When you give yourself to God, you will find reason to live. And you will no longer grieve over a great loss. With that, the holy man handed him a Bible and urged him to read about Jesus. Nicholas was hesitant at first, but he took the Bible home and began to read it. The more he read, the more he understood what Jesus was saying. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. Be kind to those who are less fortunate. Forgive those who offend you. Move past the challenges of yesterday so you can experience the joy of this day. Be at peace with all people just as God is at peace with all people. For the first time in many years, Nicholas felt love in his heart, and he thought how wonderful it would be if he could just meet Jesus. As he pondered these things, he drifted into a deep sleep. And it wasn't long after he'd fallen asleep that he heard a voice, and he sat up in his bed, and he looked into the darkness and said, "Who's there?" "Nicholas," the voice said, "if you wish to be with me, look out in the street tomorrow, and there I will be." Soon Nicholas was wide awake. He wondered if he actually heard a voice or if he'd just been dreaming. And if there was a voice, could it really have been Jesus? Was he truly coming to visit? Uncertain, Nicholas went back to bed, but he was so filled with excitement that he couldn't fall asleep. The next morning, he rose before dawn. It was Christmas Day, and he felt better than he'd felt in a long time. He immediately went to the front of the shop and drew up the shades. If Jesus was to come, he thought, I would want to see him approaching. Nicholas then made a big kettle of soup and 2 loaves of bread. It was much more than he could eat in a week. But he thought, if Jesus visits me today, I will be prepared for him to stay as long as he likes. Nicholas sat in the front window, watching for Jesus like a schoolboy, waiting, hoping, praying that Jesus would visit him. He noticed a man older than himself across the street shoveling snow. He recognized him as the man called Martin, a man most people wanted little to do with because when Martin was very young, he got into a lot of trouble and he ended up in jail. The only work he could find now was menial work that hardly provided for his needs. Nicholas thought an old man that weak and fragile shouldn't be out shoveling all this snow. So he went across the street to help someone that no one else would bother to help. When he was finished shoveling, Nicholas invited Martin back to his shop and gave him a bowl of soup and some bread. And when Martin finished eating, Nicholas led him to his favorite chair by the fire. And then Nicholas went back to the window and waited for Jesus to come. As Nicholas looked out the window, he saw a young woman leaning against the building. The woman had a baby in her arms, but neither were dressed very warmly for the weather. Nicholas hurried outside and invited the woman into his shop. She told him that her husband had gone off to war and had not been heard from since. At one time, she had a job washing dishes, but when the baby came, she got laid off her job. As time went by, she had to sell everything they had in order to feed herself and her child, until at last all they had were a single threadbare garment between the two of them. Nicholas went to a trunk. He invited the woman in. He went to a trunk in the far end of the room, and from inside it, he took out a beautiful, radiant coat that at one time belonged to his wife, and a small bundle of baby clothes that were the last reminder of his young son. He gave the coat and baby clothes to the woman and then invited them to sit at the table and eat. The day was wearing on, and Nicholas was getting tired and began to worry that perhaps Jesus wasn't going to be visiting him. He even began to question this whole idea as foolish. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe there wasn't such a thing as Jesus coming. About that time, Nicholas heard loud voices outside his shop. Looking out the window, he saw a woman holding onto the arm of a young boy with one hand and beating him over the head with the other. When Nicholas hurried outside to see what was going on, the woman pointed to the big basket of apples and explained that she sold apples for a living and that she caught him trying to steal one of her apples, and you should put him in jail. He needs to pay for what he's doing. But Nicholas thought otherwise. He talked to the woman about forgiveness, and he talked to the young man about treating other people the way you want to be treated. And then he invited them both into the house and offered them a bowl of soup and some bread. The young man walked over and hugged her and told her he was sorry, and the woman's face softened, and she reached into the basket and pulled out the biggest, brightest red apple she had and gave it to him. Nicholas was feeling really good about all this, but the day was almost over, and it was getting dark, and it appeared that Jesus wasn't going to visit him that day after all. And even if he did, with all the people there, there was no place for him to sit. And they'd already eaten all the soup and the bread, so there was nothing to offer him. As the day ended, the guests thanked Nicholas for his hospitality, and one by one they left. Christmas was over. Nicholas pulled down the shades, turned out the lights, and went to his small room in the back of the shop. He was tired. It had been a busy day, but still, he felt better than he'd had since his wife and son had passed away. He wondered about the voice the night before. Had he imagined all of this, or would Jesus visit him on some other day? Just before retiring, Nicholas took the Bible that the holy man had given him, rested it on his lap, and the pages fell open to the 25th chapter of Matthew. There he read the words of Jesus speaking to the disciples. "The kingdom of God is yours. For I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was cold, and you gave me clothes. I had done bad things, and you forgave me." The disciples were confused, and they asked Jesus, "When were you a stranger? When did we feed you? When did we give you clothes? And what bad things did you do that we forgave you for?" And Jesus replied, "Truly I say to you, what you do to the least of the people, you do to me. And what you give them, you give me." How powerful a story is that for our lives? How many opportunities do we pass up to do something good for someone and expect nothing in return? How many times do we misjudge other people based on our own preconceived notions? If we were to follow Jesus' teachings to the letter, there would be no homelessness, there would be no starvation, there would be no poverty. Each one of us has the responsibility. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can tell some traveler that he's going wrong, then my living will not be in vain. That is the meaning of Christmas. Take that into your heart as we move into meditation.